Hey everybody, it's Erik, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. Awesome. Let me know when you're recording as well.
I'm recording.
Cool. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Village Global's Venture Stories. I'm here today with a very special returning guest, Greg Isenberg. Greg, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Erik. Feels good to be back.
So Greg, every year we do a consumer social roundup. We used to do it with Donnie Dinch and Galpert. You know, earlier this year we lost Dinch. Now we're losing Galpert. Only one can remain. We're here to do a consumer social roundup. We haven't spoken since COVID. So why don't we sort of start there? How has COVID hit consumer social? What has it meant for the space? Obviously, you started a company in the space a few years ago, Islands. It was sort of in the nuclear winter. And then consumer social is getting more excited. Presumably, it's been accelerating under COVID. Why don't you talk about your own sort of journey and evolution, and then let's talk about how the space has evolved since.
Totally. So, yeah, I mean, 2016, I started a company in the nuclear winter of social. This is an era when Facebook was going to copy you. Facebook is eating the world. And, there was basically such a small amount of venture capital allocated to social. So, people like me and Galpert and Dinch, we're crazy. And, just because there was a lack of funding didn't mean we weren't going to go and start stuff. So started a company. It was like Slack for college, sold it to WeWork, joined as the head of product strategy at WeWork. And yeah, now I'm back in the game, and I'm back in the game primarily. One of the reasons is because I love building internet communities, and COVID has made consumer social hot again for the first time since 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yeah. And how you've chosen an interesting structure to how you want to sort of build and work with companies in the space. You could have just started a company. You could have just, been focused as an investor. How have you sort of chosen your hybrid model? Why don't you discuss the model and then shows how you landed on it?
Yeah, totally. So, 2020 hit, COVID hit, and I looked at it and I said, there's just, you look at, I use the example of Reddit. There's so many communities thriving on Reddit. Facebook groups has over 1 billion monthly active users. There's been this shift from broadcast, I want to broadcast everything, to small group, communication. People want to be with their homies. They want to be with their people. And I just believe that there's an opportunity to build, hundreds of multi-million user vertical networks over the next 5 years. And when I looked at that and I said, do I want to start a company, raise venture capital, and go build, a social app? I was kind of like, no, I think there's too much opportunity, and I want to work on multiple things. I want, the idea for Late Checkout, which is my new company, we do 3 things. Number 1 is a product studio that builds internet communities and products that bring people together. So we fund our own ideas, we launch products. Number 2, we have an agency where we work with some of the leading technology companies, internet communities. And number 3 is we have a fund where we acquire internet communities. So that's the structure, and the reason why we're doing it is because there's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, and let's talk about sort of the white space, or let's get into some ideas. Where are interesting opportunities now that you might want to build, invest in, or just see happen? Some of the ways you've described it are sort of the unbundling of Facebook, of Reddit, of LinkedIn. How do you sort of think about the white space, and let's get into some of those opportunities?
Totally. I mean, broadly speaking, I think what's happening is that all these companies just got really big. I mean, Facebook is a $750 billion company. These products, have become extremely bloated. And then, you and I have talked about LinkedIn before, for example, over the years. It's been years now, and LinkedIn does a lot of things great when you look at that as an example. But is there an opportunity to take a piece of LinkedIn and just focus it on, frontline workers or designers or engineers and build LinkedIn for X? Absolutely. And there's, that's what's happening, and that's where the opportunity is. And, that's why, for those listeners who don't know, like when people talk about unbundling or bundling, like we're kind of exiting a bundling era and we've moved into this unbundling era. So that's like a really important thing. And the second important thing is that, and we've never talked about really, is like this sort of like this no code, low code movement and how fast it is to create stuff. So, I think there's such an opportunity for like anyone listening who's like passionate about, could be anything from, green tea and creating like a vertical network for green tea, or, if you're a cashier, like creating a LinkedIn for cashiers and just thinking about, all these different problem sets. There's just a lot, and I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to just jam with you. Like, I'd love to use this time, if it's cool, to just like talk about ideas. What are you seeing what are different vertical networks or, areas of the internet that you think could be unbundled right now?
Well, one thing I just want to mention first is that because whenever we talk about vertical networks, people often say, yeah, but how big can it be? Can it be venture scale? I think what you're saying first off is you don't care if it's venture scale because of no code, because it's easier to get things off the ground, because you could charge earlier. You actually don't need to raise money off this. That said, you had this one tweet where Sony was rumored, I guess, to pay $1.5 billion for Crunchyroll, which is a network for manga and anime, and that's pretty niche. You'd think, and so the idea to build compelling multi-billion, or billion-dollar companies in the space seems exciting. I mean, one thing that I've been curious about, just to pick a sector. So I've been pretty intrigued by Clubhouse and sort of what other opportunities can emerge. One that I'm curious about is sports. I feel like we have not channeled the energy of sports fans to sort of talk shit with each other, to analyze plays with each other, to really build and find camaraderie with each other in a really strong vertical network in the way that Discord has for gamers. I think there's a huge opportunity in sports. I know there are challenges around sort of the rights issues and stuff like that, but that to me seems like a big opportunity. The other one I'll mention really quick, and this is less of a vertical, but more of a digital experience. I'm in Prescott, Arizona. I haven't seen people in a while. I want to simulate a group event where I'm not just talking to one person, but I'm overhearing conversations that other people are having. I could sort of seamlessly navigate between conversations. I've seen people try to emulate that in the office, digital offices. But I think there's, how do you make sort of group bar experiences or group experiences native to the internet is something I'm really excited about.
Okay, let's double click into sports to begin with.
Sure.
So I've also, I think a little bit about sports too, because what's happened was, with COVID, obviously, is that we aren't able to visit our favorite bars and, arenas to like access the community of sports. And then when you go online, they're like the only place to talk about sports is in group chats, like with your friends. That's number one. Number two, it's like go to a subreddit like NBA or whatever, or Facebook group, or like Twitter, like NBA Twitter is a really big thing and stuff like that. The problem with Twitter is, it works if if it's you or I and we tweet, like some people like our tweets, but for the vast majority of people, they tweet and no one listens.
Yeah.
And that's where it breaks down. So, yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? So like, this is a great example of like, okay, how do you unbundle the subreddit and, NBA? So what are some ideas that you would have in terms of how you would unbundle it?
It's interesting. I mean, so Bleacher Report sort of what they did is they made a whole new class of like writers that were able to emerge and get discovered. I remember sort of Ben Rubin talked about how Meerkat, the reason why he thinks it didn't take off is that there aren't exactly these sort of like video stars that he thought would take off in the same way that YouTube stars took off for Meerkat. I think for sports, I wonder if there is a latent demand for like announcers or hearing like Stephen A. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people have friends who are like, hey, this person is as entertaining or talking about sports. Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith is a phenomenon. He would not be a phenomenon if he was just on Twitter, but hearing his voice is so powerful. So I wonder if it's the audio, either play by play or just sort of like just audio insights, because we have sort of localized, Twitter sports stars, but I wonder if that's an avenue that hasn't yet been democratized in a way that you could discover new Stephen A. Smiths or new, the connection between Barkley and, whatever, Shaq and Ernie Johnson, Kenny Jet Smith. That's a powerful chemistry. I wonder if there's some friend groups who have that chemistry who would get audience. I think it's like Clubhouse, or what I think Clubhouse will turn into eventually is a star-driven community where it's a small amount of people, just like Twitter, who have a lot of audience and like radio, basically. So could you make sort of, more democratized social radio for sports?
Okay, so that's interesting. I'll throw another idea out there. So, like when I think of like a great sports game, I think of like moments. So, especially during playoffs, like when you talk about like, let's say a finals game, you talk to your friend about the 3, 4, 5, 6 moments. So the question is, how do you break down like a game into moments? So basically, you go onto this website, NBAmoments.com, and after the fact, you see like the 5 or 7 moments, not like in Twitter moments, but I mean like a beautiful timeline of what's happened, and then allow anyone. Because that's the problem with Clubhouse is like, yes, if LeBron James is going to go in Clubhouse and, it's at this point, it's open to everyone, like there's going to be 1 million people, listening and then like 5 people talking. And that's where it becomes less fun. Like it becomes fun when you're able to like engage with someone and get feedback quick. So I think there's an opportunity to create a social network. I would start with one team. That's how I would start. Like forget like sports, forget NBA, like Toronto Raptors. How do you build a social network for the Toronto Raptors? Distill it to the 5 to 10 moments every single game, allow anyone to engage in discussion, get feedback really quickly, reward those people for contributing. I'm no longer going to the bar and Jimmy, the bartender, is like, hey man, did you see the game? And like I want to go to a place where I'm known and it's recreating that.
I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. One sort of somewhat adjacent idea I have is and I'm sure some people are doing it, I would love to see people better quantify fandom. And this isn't just sports, but basically make everything into collectibles, like memes, ideas, organizations, even people. Basically, if you're excited about something, like let's say you're the first to discover Stratechery, I don't know, or some musician or some whatever, you can sort of just buy this thing and it says almost like CryptoKitty style, like you're the first person to do it. That there's a second person, third person, fourth person. You can also imagine like crypto, it's sort of, like you're staking it and it becomes more valuable. But even if you took out that part, I think people would pay just for the association to be able to say, hey, I was early in discovering this thing. I think quantifying fandom, the title I had for this was Prove You're a Hipster. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something really interesting there because people want to build identity around sort of niche things that they're excited about. They're always looking for new ways to build identity, and they also want to promote it. They also want to say like, this artist is amazing. This meme is amazing. This team is amazing.
I actually think it's 2 things. I think it's people want to be the first. So to your point, people want to be the first. And number 2, people want to be like the equivalent of like, if you remember Foursquare, the mayorship.
Yes.
Like I'm the mayor of this, Carbone in New York. And then you just like tell all your friends. I'm the biggest fan of, the Toronto Raptors. And so I think there's a social network around absolutely that, around, bragging that you're the biggest and the first.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we're missing that a little bit on the internet today. I love social networks. I love social apps that are kind of like a treasure hunt that you can like go and like explore and things happen. And so I definitely see that as an opportunity for sure.
I haven't stayed close to Foursquare. Do you know much about how like why didn't they do this? Do you know how they've evolved or?
They like pivot. I'm pretty sure they pivoted to like a B2B data play, right? Like maybe. In the nuclear winter, they just went south.
Yeah,
and I'm sure they built a really big business. It's just don't start a social app to build a big business.
Yeah, totally.
Start a social app because you're going to have the time of your life. You're going to learn about how people behave. Yeah. You're going to be, I think the best product people are game developers or consumer social people.
Yeah.
Because they understand how to design products to make people do things. And they have to go deep into people's brains.
Yeah. An adjacent idea I'm excited about. I still think there's more opportunities to do things around money. I'll give two examples here. One is, I brought this up last time, but I still, receipts. There's something to be done about receipts. Venmo cracked into a little bit, but more really like building an identity around like, here's the stuff I care about. And this is maybe backing into the fandom idea. It's like, I care about this restaurant. I care about this charity. I care about, this artist. Like these are I'm a patron. Almost like Patreon, I feel like it's a transaction platform, but it's not really an identity platform. I don't go to anyone's like Patreon to see like who they are. AngelList, I do, right? Like you're like, oh yeah, you back down, you're friends with Greg. Like there is some identity that AngelList has built, which is really interesting. It's niche to startups, of course, and angel investing. But there's something around money that's interesting. There's receipts because it's this data source we're not leveraging, and it could be tied to identity. The second thing, this is more connected to the AngelList ideas. I want like people going crazy around stock investing, right? Stonks. There's like whole movement. And I wonder why people aren't doing it way more in public. Like here's my entire social, like really just see what everyone's portfolio is, be able to comment on it and stuff like that. Like I wonder if people would enjoy that, learn from that, and if that could be a social network.
Well, I don't know if you've seen public.com.
No, I've heard of it. They're probably trying to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I'm an advisor there, and they're a late checkout client, and they're just trying to do a similar thing around kind of like putting stuff more in the open. But going back to your original comment around like money and receipts, like I believe a purchase is just another way of saying a vote of confidence. When you buy something, you're basically just like, I believe in this thing. And does it make sense that transaction is private? Sometimes depending on what you're buying, but I think like, to build upon your idea, can you create like, especially with people staying at home and buying, people are staying at home a lot and they're buying a lot of stuff on the internet. And I don't have a place on the internet to show my votes of confidence besides my Venmo feed or whatever. So like, can I have like a 3D kind of Fortnite for my stuff that people I'm looking at we're on Zoom right now and I'm looking at your Arizona house and I'm like, I don't know, there's an art piece there with like, is that a teapot or something like that? Like I want to go into my friends' houses and see like virtually and see what they have. And I want to be able to buy them. And why doesn't that exist already?
Yeah.
Fortnite meets Venmo feed.
That makes a lot of sense. Another sort of interesting, like in COVID, you'd think that there'd be some like breakout dating social network, right? Like, isn't now the time for people desperate for new formats? Asking for a friend, of course. But don't you respect? Are you seeing anything new in dating?
Not enough. I think that there's a huge opportunity, and people first and foremost, people pay for dating apps. So I don't know why more people aren't creating dating apps right now. If I were creating a dating app, I would make it audio first. So when you think about the resolution of formats, you have like text, which is impersonal. Then you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have like in person, which is obviously like super personal. And then right before that, you have FaceTime. So, in the digital context, you basically have text on one end and video on the other end. Audio is this kind of like perfect in the middle. I might not be ready to like video chat with someone, but I might be down to just like give someone a voice note. So I think a voice note dating app, and voice notes are another thing that's super popular internationally, not that popular in the US, but I think if you build a voice note, if anyone's building this, like hit me up. I'm interested in investing. A voice note based dating app. And I think we can learn a lot. Like you can learn a lot about someone through their voice. Like I'm seeing someone now, but in the past, like I've had a phone call with someone and I feel like that voice is just like, I don't know if they're the one.
Yeah. How do you think about async versus synchronous? Like a Clubhouse style versus, recorded?
Yeah. Synchronous or is it, another way of thinking about it is like a live is just a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
And get right. So like people who are thinking about building social apps, just know that you're like, if you're doing a synchronous thing, it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
If you're doing an asynchronous thing, it's going to be a lot easier. So, I tend to like to focus on, what I call asynchron-ish, which is, not completely synchronous, but not completely async, somewhere in the middle. I think there's a lot of opportunity to build asynchronous products over the next 5 years. I'll give you an example. I think that we're overloaded with Slack messages or Microsoft Teams or whatever. Basically, work-based messaging products are taking over our lives. And I think there's a huge opportunity to build something that's a bit more, less email, but less messaging, somewhere in between.
Yeah. Interesting. Remember, I think was it called Talk Show? Michael Sippy's idea? The texting. I still think that something can be done there because, I mean, some exchanges are just really funny. I wonder if they're also really funny to other people, or it almost has a little bit of like text from last night feel. Like, I wonder if there's something that could be done around that. Do you have a take?
I mean, my take on my thesis on messaging is that we're at like messaging overload right now, and we're looking for higher resolution stuff. So I would, I'm more interested in creating video-based or audio-based stuff. And there's just not enough people working on social apps right now. Like I can think of I don't know if you're seeing a ton of maybe you're seeing a ton of consumer social app companies, or, but I'm seeing just a few, not enough. And I think I want to see more experimentation.
Yeah, I'm not seeing enough. I'm seeing social stuff around the office a lot. Everyone's like, how do we make remote teams easier? But I mean, do you think that there's a new version of like a chat roulette or an Omegle? Like, I wonder if there's sort of like it's weird when I want to hang out with my friends. Why am I using work tools? Why am I using there should be something that's more specified to social? I know it's in some ways enterprise stuff is getting better and getting more social, but I feel like I want to see more experimentation there.
So I don't know. Do you remember Sean Parker's Airtime product?
Yes, I remember it was a video-based product. I don't remember the exact version of it.
Everyone who's listening to this needs to watch the video. I don't know if it's still up, but check on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it. Maybe we can link it in the show notes or something like that. That basically what he created was a chat roulette. Those who don't remember, you basically press a button, you get paired to hopefully not a human genitalia. You get paired with a person, and you can talk to them or you can skip. And what Sean Parker, president of Facebook and co-founder of Napster and board member of Spotify, what he did, which was brilliant, was this concept that basically you would put in, you connected with your Facebook, it grabbed all your interest and where you're from and all that stuff back when people actually updated their Facebook, and then it would connect you based on who the algorithm thought you might be interested in. So let's say I live in, Soho or whatever in New York, it would connect me with someone potentially from Soho or someone, worked in tech or worked in whatever. And it was live, not for very long. It was live for a couple months or a few months or whatever. And, they spent $20 million. It was a whole big thing. But the point I'm trying to make is, it was a simple product that connected you around interests in a serendipitous, fun slot machine way. And I love products that are like slot machines.
Yeah.
You pull the thing and you don't know what you're going to get next. And it made it a lot fun. And the best part about it is it's kind of I'm also obsessed with products that are alternatives to Facebook Inc., Instagram, etc. And it's interesting now, that product would do super well now because people just want to hang out, meet new people, but it needs to be based on something. It can't just the problem with chat roulette and Omegle and all these kind of sketchy video stuff is that it's sketchy.
Yeah,
it feels like you're walking around the red light district at 3 a.m. We don't want that. We want it it needs to feel like going into your favorite coffee shop, or needs to feel like going to your favorite cocktail bar, your favorite restaurant, and oh my god, you see someone who looks interesting and you want to go up to them and talk to them. And that needs to be, and that's why when people are is there room for more social apps? I'm we have not reached the pinnacle of social experiences using technology. Yeah. I refuse to believe it.
Yeah. You let's go deeper. You mentioned you're excited about things that are sort of alternatives to Facebook Inc., or sort of unbundling in interesting ways. Obviously, there's vertical groups. We'll get to that. Are there other sort of creative approaches? I mean, I'm seeing some people try to create pseudonymous identity networks. That's like one example of something that like obviously Facebook would never do. Are there other things that come to mind for you in terms of like what are alternatives or different versions that you'd like to see?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of things that I've seen recently that I thought were interesting. There's an app that called, I think It's Me. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like an avatar based. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Basically, the way it works is you download the app, you customize your avatar, and then you chat roulette style connect with someone. And so let's say I press connect and I say like I want to be connected. There's sort of like a quasi dating element. It's like I want to be connected with females.
Yep.
And then I connect with a female and I see their avatar and I see them as they're talking. Like I can hear it and I can see them moving their body and moving their head. So it's kind of like, before we were talking about that spectrum on the left, text is sort of, lowest resolution on the right, video, and in the middle audio. You kind of have 3/4 where you have this like audio plus avatar kind of world. So I think there's some interesting stuff to be done in avatar first social stuff. I think there's been people who've been trying this obviously for a while, but I think, now is the time. Like basically, if you want to start a social app, what I would do is look at like every venture, like look at every Greylock, Sequoia, Benchmark, social app companies that were funded between 2005 and 2018. Like go and like just like mark them all and just like, okay, this company, what did they try to do? Can you get their deck? And what did they learn? And go speak to the founder and just like, because there's basically all those ideas probably could work now, or at least a lot of them can work.
Let's talk about some ideas. Like, what ideas come to mind for you that were tried back then but didn't necessarily take off for whatever reason? We were just talking about Meerkat earlier. I mean, Highlight was location based, and it's harder in COVID. Like, what idea? We talked about the talk show, the texting one. What other ideas come to mind for you that Mark Andreessen has this line? There are no bad ideas, just too early ideas. What comes to mind for you when you do that exercise?
I mean, I disagree with Mark Andreessen. I think there are bad ideas, but I think we can learn from them. Yeah. Comes top of mind. Like, I still think there's a huge opportunity in music. Like, if you remember, the Spotify Facebook ticker integration was kind of interesting, where Spotify was like pushing what people were listening to Facebook, and it was really cool because you were learning about what people listen to. So I think there's a ton of opportunity to build like the anti-Spotify that's more social. I think, and then past examples, like I'm just thinking music, like SoundCloud was close, like the time-based comments was interesting. I wish they would have doubled down on social. I don't know how you feel about SoundCloud.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's become a utility, and it's like, why do I even need it if I need Spotify? But I think, the comments could have been really interesting. You could have built identity around it, connected people around it.
Another app which I think was interesting, which probably not many people remember, it was an app called LocalMind, started by Lenny Rachitsky, who's amazing. Go follow him on Twitter. He sold that to Airbnb, and it was a cool concept at the time. It was like early mobile days, maybe like 2010 to 2009. And basically it was an app that allowed you to ask questions to people at particular locations. So obviously, COVID era, you might not need the location piece, but I think there's something really interesting about building like Q&A. Like Quora has like some of the best content on the internet, but it feels like it's stagnating a little. And what I learned from LocalMind is that there potentially is interesting opportunities to layer on a use case plus Q&A. Use case here being like, it used to be like, people, is there a line at the bar?
Yeah. I think Jelly was trying to do something in this space too. I've long wanted something that combines sort of the dynamism of Twitter
right.
with sort of the durability of Quora. Like their search is great. I sometimes find things that were written, a decade ago, but there needs to be more just aliveness to it, or just reason to engage. And it's crazy. Quora has some of the best content on the internet. Twitter has some of the worst content on the internet. Yet I check Twitter every day, and Quora, rarely.
What was Justin Kahn's thing with the live? Whale.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, live
That was
Q&A.
cool.
Yeah,
Like Whale would work today.
yeah. I think Whale was very cool. And I think what's cool about something like that is you could combine that with sort of you could there's a lot of great answers in that, and you could transcribe them. I mean, it is like some of the best content today in the world happens on podcasts.
Right.
Yet we don't have like a social network around sort of, maybe Rap Genius could have gotten into this eventually. Like annotating transcripts or building sort of like, like I would love to be friends with people who like the same niche, obscure podcast, right?
Yep. Or like going back to our NBA Toronto Raptors example, is like every great podcast has 5 or 10 great moments, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you extract that, put that somewhere, and allow people to meet like-minded people to discuss those moments?
Totally. I mean, I keep getting transfixed by this idea that, when you want to search for a book on Amazon, you go to Amazon and then you see all the books that are like it, and you just go down this rabbit hole of that. And that doesn't really exist for people. I mean, Twitter is a non-algorithmic way to do it, but I just feel like we can be making way better recommendations for people. And I think one easy way, low-hanging fruit, is just like a lot of people bond over certain common interests. For a lot of people, if you said, "Hey, if you're a fan of this writer or this organization or this whatever," we'll probably share similar values and have really great conversation at the least. And so ways that we can match people up, or even just show people what those are, it just seems like a big opportunity. People haven't really figured it. Maybe they figured it out in like different niches, like books for Goodreads, but I don't know.
I mean, I would start with go reinvent the book club.
Yeah.
And pick a vertical. Go reinvent the book club. Go check on Reddit who is going to be the most passionate vertical. Go reinvent the book club. Go charge $20 a month, recurring revenue, $30 a month, whatever. Build a beautiful brand landing page, and spend some money on customer acquisition to get people. Get like incentivize people in that community from that subreddit to bring them onto the platform. And beauty about book clubs is it's inherently viral, because you're bringing in like 5-10 people. They're going to talk about it. Oh, I just read a book on, Shakespeare in my book club on XYZ platform. Oh, what's XYZ platform?
Totally.
Like there's no one owns book clubs on the internet.
Yeah. That's a big opportunity for sure. When we talk about unbundling Reddit, you mentioned sort of go for, the groups that are most active. What groups come to mind for you that you think are underserved in terms of like, oh, I potentially invest in something in this space, or with your request for startups in terms of like maybe audiences that you want people to build for?
I really like new audiences that didn't exist 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago. I generally don't like to compete with, let's just say it's easier to create a product for a new community than it is to create a product for an old community. Maybe there's a new game that's coming out and it's not out yet, but there's an opportunity to build some product for that community, be it, let's say, fan art or whatever. And I think, so I think a lot about that. So examples of like new, maybe like, there's probably a lot more like DoorDash delivery people now. So like, how do you create something for them? Or so, and I think that, so that's how I think about it. That's my framework.
Yeah. New audiences that didn't exist, or sort of uniquely empowered that that makes a lot of sense. What do you think StockX or Goat tapped into? I mean, these are sort of interesting communities.
Well, I think a few things. I think that, both, let's just talk about Goat. I think Goat especially created a brand that really resonated with that particular audience. I mean, literally the name Goat, like it's perfect. And Goat was competing at the time with eBay, electronic bay. Like how, it doesn't get more 90s than that.
Yeah.
So I think like fresh coat of paint, fresh brand, solve 2 to 4 of like killer pain points of that particular audience, like verification, pricing, etc. Understood mobile customer acquisition really well, and grew with the community. Like was constantly like speaking with the community and getting feedback. in a market that like no one took seriously.
Yeah.
Like no one took sneakerheads seriously. And I bet like I think they just did Goat get valued at more than $1 billion?
Yeah.
Did I read that?
Yep.
I mean, the reason why, earlier we were talking about vertical networks and, the age old, whoa, like how big of a market could it really be? And it's like, well, maybe 10 years ago, it couldn't be, these things couldn't be $1 billion opportunities. But because how big these large tech companies have become, if you become 1% of Facebook, you're like a $5 billion, $7 billion company. If you become 1% of Netflix, you're $2 billion, so it's, and Crunchyroll being another example, right? Like market cap of Netflix, I don't know what it is, probably like hundreds of billions of dollars.
Totally.
1%.
Yep. You're talking about sort of building things on top of new audiences. There are also, new platforms, of course. We talked a little bit about audio being in the middle of video and text. What else are you excited about in the realm of audio? You mentioned, of course, dating. I've seen some people who are sort of working on actually like sex-related things with AirPods. There are other sort of social networks that have tried to be built off of audio. Where do you see potentially exciting there? Like what hasn't been done yet there?
I mean, I don't think anything has been done in audio yet.
Yeah.
To be honest, like Clubhouse still has like 10,000 users.
Yep.
There's more than 7 billion people on this planet. And for those in the audience who think that like, oh, I can start an audio network because Clubhouse is raised at $100 million valuation, et cetera, like you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to audio. Yeah. This is just the beginning. I still haven't seen, I mean, there's a Chalk app.
Yeah.
I don't know if you played with that. Like there's a few people trying stuff out, but I think what people need to do is go a bit, less like Clubhouse for X and more, pick an audience, think about audio and just it can be completely different. It can be completely different Clubhouse. Totally. So I think that, a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I like sports for that one just because I feel like there's unique sort of audio content that's emerged from it, but other ones are big opportunities as well. I think one of who would have thought that there would be like a Twitch for, is it ASMR?
Yeah.
I mean, just who would have thought that a community like that would be so rabid and so, even as big as it is.
Twitch for X, super big. Clubhouse for X, super big. LinkedIn for X, super big. HQ Trivia, don't sleep on it, for X, super big. People sleep on HQ Trivia because like, the narrative is that it was really big and then it became not really big. There was something magical about a video-based, trivia-based, interactive TV type experience. There's a ton of opportunity to look at.
Totally. I think there's a tension when you're building a social thing for a demographic of like, are you trying to help people in this space get money? Are you trying to help them date? Are you trying to help them make friends? And sometimes these sort of overlap, right? People say, do they say every messaging thing becomes a dating thing or right. Something like that, or professional thing? How do you sort of think about these sort of like core, motivations that people have, and whether you design for one of them, multiple of them, none of that? How do you think, Rick?
I think people want to, for social apps at least, they either want to, the saying is get paid, get laid, but there's also learn. They want to learn.
Yeah.
So that there's a whole, cottage industry around upskilling and reskilling, and there's a whole social element of that. I talked about in one of my Substacks about the unbundling of Udemy and how the next generation of education startups are not, are basically going to have a social component to it and have like small group classes and building bonds like that. And I know you have been also talking about, unbundling of universities and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say learn, be entertained. Entertained is a big one. And we've seen that with TikTok, and then paid and laid. That's simple as that.
Totally. On the university thing, I would just say, Bern Hobart has this great piece. He's a great writer, and he says Lambda's fascinating, but he thinks what really is disrupting education is YC actually. And he says like what they do basically is, what they've done is taken sort of the most important components of the university, unbundle it in the sense of like what is a credential, a network, and some education and in-person experience, and they basically shortened it by 95% and also changed the business model around it. And so what Andek is sort of saying is like, yeah, that is a really powerful. There is something about like this 8-week or 10-week cohort that is a lot more cost effective and maybe 95% as good as this sort of like 2-year $250,000 or 4-year $250,000 experience. And that's not unique to startups. Let's do it for a bunch of other categories who would also benefit from just a way more efficient way to offer that value prop. One funny line Bryn did say was that if you think of college as a 4-year party on a night, adjusted a cost basis, night over night, it is a better bet than One Oak or some of these popular clubs, which I thought was a fun dig. One thing I want to talk a little bit about is you've sort of coined this term minimum viable audience. I want to sort of transition into some of the mechanics here. Let's say we either pick a category, maybe it's a book club, maybe it's something else. What do you think are some of the key steps that people should have in mind for how to get these off the ground?
Totally. I mean, I like Reddit as a starting point. So I use things like redditlist.com, redditmetrics.com, stuff like that. I try to find subreddits that are growing within the last 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days. I pick a vertical. I join the community. I do some research. I sort by all-time best. And I see what types of conversations are sticking with people. Then I decide if I want to go and build a product in that particular community. I either build a utility being like something that they really need, hopefully on a day-to-day basis, a social network. I think about the social network as how do I create something that's like 5 to 10x better than Facebook groups and needs to be that, or else there's no point in it, or a marketplace, buying and selling transactions. And then I 99% of time create a wait list for it. So I generally will invest in creating, like, we talked about Goat. Like Goat had such a great brand. Like how do you do something similar where you create a brand, like for green tea lovers, it's to come up with like a word that they really love and that they resonate with, and a brand. And I think Silicon Valley invests in branding at the early stage. I feel like a bit of the narrow end design, branding especially, like I think logos are really important. I think names are really important. So spending some cycles on that. And then minimal viable audience, to me, that just means getting the community rolling, getting the flywheel rolling. And how do I usually do that is I recruit people from that subreddit, from those Facebook groups. I go on Twitter, I @ people. I'll do everything I can to, like, literally guerrilla style, get the first 100 or 500 people onto the product. And I use exclusivity as a big way to build buzz.
Yeah, I love it. Talk a little bit about some of the principles that for you make communities really strong, or even just how do you transition an audience to a community, and then let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts for community building, and I can share mine.
Yeah. I mean, I think community is definitely on vogue right now. It's really like trendy, and people just basically use the word community instead of audience, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like, an audience doesn't mean a community. You can, a meme page with 35 million followers might not be a community. They just like memes. So yeah, the first thing is I see audience is different than community, true community. And then the question is, how do you build an audience, and basically convert them to true community? And I think that's like something that isn't really talked about a lot, but there's an opportunity to, like, let's say you do want to create an app idea or something for a particular subreddit. You can just start with creating a meme page for green tea lovers, or, build the audience first and then convert them into whatever it is, the sort of product that you're building. So that's how I feel about audience versus community. And then do's and don'ts about communities. I mean, the way I think about it always is a community is essentially just like a good house party. A good house party, you walk in, there isn't too many people, there's not too little people. The music is just right. It's your favorite song. You look around, you see some familiar faces. It feels really good. Your dopamine starts hitting. It progressively gets better and better as time goes on, and you don't want to leave. Like, if you can think about developing your community as, being a participant at like the world's best house party for you, then you'll win. And I think the big thing is, like, how do you as the community, if you're designing a community, you really have to you have to put yourself, I guess, in the shoes of the true community people. And it takes a lot of user research and a lot of really understanding, even if you are a member of that community, to really distill that into what these people want.
I think one thing that people don't appreciate early on is that you don't, for the house party example, you don't just throw the house party or put the event up and then expect everybody to come. It's a lot of manual work. At the same time, you want that manual work to seem as community driven as possible. So an example of the house party might be like, you want Josh Ellman, whoever just came to mind, to invite other people, but you need to draft the text for him to send that invitation out. So it looks like he did it, but you made it as easy as possible for him to do that. And I thought of it because in product, like, I remember he posted a product and we were like, hey, can we post this on product on your behalf? He said, sure. So he didn't have to do anything, but it seemed as if he did it. And the reason why that's important, not to lie to people or deceive people, it's to create precedents such that, and sort of standards such that, oh, Josh is in this community, I should get involved too. And so people too often just expect people to just show up, but you need to give them the map, the directions, the time, keep reminding them, give them a special place at the party where they're going to see people, just like them. Even if they're not going to end up staying another thing I think about is like, who are the people you can get to the party that if you get them there, other people will want to be, club promoters know this better than anyone else. And even if those people are going to leave early or they're not going to, stay in future parties, you got to light a match, like when you're starting something, and it takes extra effort for that to happen.
Well, I think that's completely on point. I think double clicking into the house party example, it's like, even be more specific. Like, you want to create a house party that, let's just say you want to create a house party that a lot of people are dancing at.
Yeah.
So what do you need to do that? You need a dance floor. And, you might need like people who love dancing to be the first people to be invited. Peter Pham.
Yeah. Need Peter Pham. I'll give you that.
So I think you want it so that like when Greg Isenberg walks in as, person number 50 in this party, and I open the door and I see like, whoa, everyone's on the dance floor. I need to go on the dance floor. Totally. This is the precedence that's been set.
Yeah.
And I think, so I think that's a really good point that you made. And the second, like in this case, making it easy for people to share is really, really important because it gets people like them onto the product.
Totally. For Product Hunt, we send the top 10 people every day. We sent them an email saying, hey, would you like to write a blog post about your experience? Here are some templates of blog posts. And here, like, based on your numbers, like, here's something that might be helpful. And they're like, oh, wow, you did all this work for me. Yeah, sure. It's easy. And that was great for us. One tension people have with community building is how to best monetize. And, sometimes people are like, should I charge a community directly, or should I use this community to then get some other, as a wedge for some other purpose? I'm curious if your rule is basically like, if the community has money to pay, charge them because they're more engaged. I'm curious if that's your rule. I mean, one thing I've thought about is that some social companies are come for the tool, stay for the network, the old Chris Dixon line. But some are the opposite, come for the network and then stay for the sort of like data or tool that the network creates as a result of it. So I think of like, Quora. Originally it was sort of this elite exclusive group, but they made all this great content that encouraged other people to come to, or even maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's Lunch Club, maybe even like it starts as this sort of like manual thing, but now they have all this data on people such they can create better matches. They're not charging directly. I'm curious how you think about monetization of communities and some of these topics.
Yeah, I mean, couple thoughts come to mind. Number one is monetization isn't bad. That's the first thing. Like, putting that out there. Like, it's completely okay to create a sustainable community, and monetization is a part of that. In fact, it's a crucial part of that, because I think that if you create something that, the community leader it's overwhelming, then that's not good for the community. So create sustainable communities, number one. Number two, think about monetization. Only monetize if it adds to the experience. If it takes away from the experience and you feel like you're being a leech on the experience, you're subtracting value, then you probably shouldn't be monetizing. But if you're creating a monetization product where, hey, actually the product is now better, like the experience is now better. I could, if you're buying dance shoes and I can hit the dance floor and it's like supercharging the experience, that's the best way to think about monetizing communities.
Okay, so here's my last question. You had this tweet the other day or the other week talking about how you had this job interview question around a Instagram audience and how people would best monetize. I think it was for dogs. Why don't you sort of discuss the interview question and maybe share what are examples of a good answer to that question? I thought it was fascinating.
Sure. So I think the question, from what I remember, is you have an Instagram account with 5 million followers. It's a dog meme page. You have 30 days to generate at least $15,000 per day. How do you do it? And it went pretty viral. I didn't expect, I didn't expect that many people to respond. But the reason I asked this question is because it's a really interesting way to get creative responses from people, and that's why it's an interview question. And the reason why I ask it specifically is Late Checkout looks at acquiring audiences, and we look at monetizing audiences. So, in terms of like cool answers, I got there was like hundreds or thousands of people who responded. I think the interesting thing is one of the more interesting ways, I think, is people who create subscription models on top of it. Just people who understand how to take the audience to build true community as the lens, like we spoke about. I think a lot about, like, I have a buddy, Elias Friedman. He has a company called The Doggist. On Instagram, there's millions of followers. It's kind of like Humans in New York, but for dogs. So he takes pictures of dogs every day and talks about them. And he's monetized in a bunch of different really interesting ways. So, to answer your question, I think like subscription-based businesses are awesome. And then starting with just developing a community and just people who answer the question with like, I don't want to monetize $15,000 a day. Like, I love that answer because, like we spoke about, it's about like, you don't want to extract, right? So the people who like push back on it were my favorite answers.
Awesome, Greg. That's a great place to wrap. This has been really fun jam on some consumer ideas. I love continuing tradition. We'll get Dinch and Galpert back next time. Why don't you just leave us with any sort of plugs in terms of what the audience can look you up on and where they can find you and your work?
Totally, yeah. My name's Greg Isenberg, so follow me on Twitter. You can check out my Substack. It's latecheckout.substack.com, where I talk about internet communities. And hit me up on Twitter. And thanks, Eric, for having me.
Yeah.
Do I get to say goodbye, everybody?
You can say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Amazing.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at villageglobal.vc.